Louise here from Boost Your Career and welcome to Boost Talk. I'm more than a little excited. I have just spent the last a little while speaking with Dr. Lois Frankel. She's president of Corporate Coaching International, a prolific and best-selling author, executive coach, and Lois is an internationally recognised expert in the field of leadership development for women. It was a really exciting Boost Talk. We spoke widely around Lois's Nice Girls series. Nice girls don't get the corner office, nice girls don't get rich, nice girls just don't get it, and nice girls don't speak up and stand out. Her messages are around empowering women in the workplace, around enhancing women's impact in the workplace, and her tips and strategies are so accessible, so reasonable. It was a fabulous conversation. She's an absolute delight, and I am so excited for you to enjoy this Boost Talk. Louise here from Boost Your Career, and welcome to Boost Talk. My guest today is Dr. Lois Frankel, well-known, prolific author and president of Corporate Coaching International. I'm sure that you've read at least one of the Nice Girls series. Nice girls don't get the corner office, nice girls don't get rich, nice girls just don't get it. And the latest audio book, Nice Girls Don't Speak Up or Stand Out. Lois is an executive coach, internationally recognised expert in the field of leadership development for women, and a philanthropist as well. Dr. Lois Frankel, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today on Boost Talk.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
Lois, I need to self-disclosure here. My obsession with your practical approach to taking charge of your own career started when I accidentally read Quit Being a Girl late in 2003. Now, I had just made a huge move from Melbourne to Brisbane, dragging my then 15-year-old daughter with me. So it was all about new schools, new roles, new houses, new life, just starting over. And it was probably the first time I was standing on my own 2 feet for the first time. And I read Quit Being a Girl. How timely is that? It was a something I've carried with me throughout my career since then. So not only am I welcoming you to Boost Talk today, I'm also thanking you for your support, unknown to you, your support in the development of my very own career. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. It touches my heart. Thank you.
Oh, it was such a specific moment for me, and experiences that I'd had in the past suddenly came together in some sort of sense. It was like, yes, this is what I need to do. And it really set me up because I was in a whole new life, in a whole new environment. So that's where I started my obsession with you, and got right into the Nice Girls series. And I'd love to talk about that. And first, as I always do, I'd like to start by asking you about your own career journey. I mean, you're a prolific author in the genre of empowering professional women to take ownership of their careers. There has to be an interesting story in there somewhere.
There always is, isn't there? You know, people ask me what it takes to write a book, and I say, you have to have something that you have to say so badly that if you don't say it, you just can't live without saying it. And I think that's really what it takes. And in my case, when you ask me to talk about my career, there was a long career before the books, actually. And it was a long and windy career. I know just before we started this, we talked about women's careers aren't linear, and they certainly aren't. Mine was quite circuitous. When I first graduated from college, my biggest aspiration was to be a residence hall director. And I thought, and from there, maybe I'll work my way up to a dean of students. And so the first part of my career, I was a residence hall director. And one summer, I was looking for a job to make some extra money. And the career development person said, why don't you, you're a good writer, why don't you go over to Arco and write, they're looking for somebody to write job descriptions. So I went over to Arco, which I did not know who it was at the time, but it was one of the biggest oil companies in the world at that time, Atlantic Richfield Company. And I went and I wrote job descriptions for the summer. And when I finished, I had earned more in that summer than I had the whole year as a residence hall director. And I thought, you know what? This feels pretty good. So I went to my boss at the time and I said, you know, I wrote these job descriptions and I hope you're happy with them. I would love to work here in human resources. I've just gotten my master's in counseling. I think it fit nicely into, we called it then, I think, employee relations. I think it fit nicely into employee relations. And fortunately for me, he hired me. Long story short, he hired me. And I was at Arco for 10 years.
Wow.
And, you know, and every few years, I would change jobs within Arco and get a lot of different tickets punched because it was a huge corporation. It looked like you were going to say something now.
No, I was just thinking it all started simply because you put yourself out there and asked a question of someone.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so anyway, I was there for 10 years. They actually paid for me to get my PhD in counseling psychology. Yeah. And so when I finally got it, I went to them and I said, you know, you've paid I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars for me to get my PhD. Now I'd like to be able to use it in the employee assistance program. And they told me that I was doing a great job where I was, and they wanted me to just stay there. And I thought, I did not go to school all these years to just stay there. So this was really the biggest risk I took in my entire life was I quit my job and I opened up a private practice of psychotherapy in downtown Los Angeles because I
Wow.
knew in downtown Los Angeles I'd be working with working people and I knew that population, right? And I wanted to have a private practice. There was only one problem, Louise. After about a year, my entire life, all I ever wanted to do was be a psychologist. From the time I was 15 years old,
Yeah.
I was a psychologist and I had a private practice. And after about a year, I thought, I'm not cut out for this.
Oh, gee.
Right? I mean, and you spend all these years
Yeah.
preparing and studying, and I quit a great job. And everybody told me not to quit my job because, you know, it's a great job. It was the moment when I wanted to jump across the couch and put my hands around my client's neck and say, how many times are we going to talk about the same thing? I really realized I should be doing something different.
Yeah, that was dangerous.
Right? I was the dangerous one there. And so
Oh,
I didn't
dear.
know what I was going to do. But as life has a way, a woman came to me and said, Lois, would you be willing to coach someone for me? Now, this was almost 40 years ago, probably good 35 years ago. And there weren't business coaches back then, but this particular woman was always on the cutting edge of everything. And I said to her, I don't know exactly what you want. And she said, Lois, you're a therapist, you've done training, you know corporate speak, you've worked in human resources, you put it all together, you have a coach. I said, I'll give it a try. And again, long story short, it changed my life because she was right. That once I started coaching people, it used every set of skills I had developed up to that point. It used all my education. And more importantly, it used my natural inclination and tendency to want to help people and move them forward. And so I was really so well suited to be a coach. And that changed my life. And so that's what I did for, you know, then the next, well, yeah, it was about 35 years. And in there, I coached both men and women, but there was a moment that really created the writing. And that was I was coaching a woman who had been sent to me for coaching because she was kind of on the aggressive side of assertive. We know what we call those women, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've been working with her. And then I went to coach her, and she lived like on the other side of the United States. I live in Los Angeles. She lived in Virginia, close to Washington. And we sat down. She said, before we get started, I want to tell you I was invited to sit on the executive committee of my company. And I went to give her a high five, and she stopped me. And I said, what? And she said, I'm not going to do it. I looked at her and I said, this better be good. And she said, I've been to those meetings, those executive committee meetings, and they're a waste of time. And what popped out of my mouth was, honey, you got to quit being a girl. And at
Absolutely.
that, right? And at that moment, all the stupid things I've seen women do because of their socialization
Yeah.
popped into my head, because I realized she was kind of that ilk that said, I have to be productive 150% of the time to really earn my way around here. And nothing is further from the truth. You and I both know that. It's not about
Yep.
how hard you work, right? It's not about how hard you work. So on
Yep.
the way back from Virginia to Los Angeles on the plane that night, I outlined all of what I was calling quit being a girl. I came up with over 100 mistakes that I saw women make because of their socialization and how those behaviors are reinforced in
Yep.
school, at work, at home.
Yep.
And then that became nice girls don't get the corner office.
Yeah.
I hope that wasn't too long.
Gosh, no, it's such a great story, and it hits on so many points that Boost Your Career is all about. One of the big ones there is listen to your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Just quiet the noise and listen to your heart. That, yes, you have aspirations. Yes, you have goals. Strive for them. That's really important. Clever people, smart girls, work out whether or not it's the path that they should be on, and then they make adjustments. And while that sounds really simple, it takes that moment, that seminal moment that you're in, and the review process that you put yourself through. I mean, I think there's a whole thing in here about reflection as well, to
Mm-hmm.
see what that means and to make some adjustments and some flexibility in your life. I think it's a remarkable story because it shows that, for me, the important part is you took your learnings and you did something with them. That's
Yeah, and that's what more women need to do. I think what happens is we get so caught up in a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. Like my life plan was to be a psychologist.
yeah,
So I really didn't see what was on the periphery.
yeah,
And that's why today I'm a big proponent, or I don't know, be exponent or proponent, but I believe you should not have a 5-year plan,
yeah,
because it prevents you from seeing what's on the periphery.
yeah.
I think 12 to 18 months out is fine, right? And then you can reassess and you can decide, what do I want to do? But to have a long-term plan, I think you get stuck in it. And I that almost happened to me.
It definitely happened to me, and it's one of the comments that I extrapolate in coaching sessions is exactly this, that yes, you can think ahead and plan ahead. That's fantastic. So long as you recognize that if you're strict about that and you don't reflect on a regular basis around where you are, do that self-awareness processing and that reflective processing, you're going to be trapped in a particular way of thinking and a particular job. And for me, it was literally corporate life. I should have become a consultant way earlier in my career than I did.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I kept making these plans, and they were good plans and they worked.
Hmm.
Was it using all my skills? I don't think so. I
Hmm.
think that's what I
Yeah.
do now. So,
Yeah. Well,
so I
and
think
that's like,
no, go.
no, I think that's why it's listening to your heart, but it's also better understanding your proclivities.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
I'm a huge fan of the Myers-Briggs. And
yeah,
I know there's a
me too.
lot of instruments out there. It's the only one I use.
Yep.
And I use it because it's simple and it's functional and you can really get it. But it does help you to see where are your preferences. That's why it's called a preference test. Now, if I had taken the Myers-Briggs at any point in my career prior to my starting a private practice, I would have seen I probably wasn't well suited to it because my own style is to want to keep moving forward. And a
Yeah.
therapist, you need to move at the pace of your client. That's appropriate. That is appropriate, not at your pace. So I would have seen that I probably wasn't the best candidate to do this. But for a coach, it uses my type perfectly.
Yeah, I completely agree. But even with Myers-Briggs, it's one of the key ones that I've used throughout my career, and for the very same reasons that it allows people to stop, take a breath, do some reflection, and start
Mhm,
seeing where is it that I should be going next. That flexibility is so important, particularly for women, I think, in their career journeys.
mhm,
They we don't we don't tend to take reflective practice seriously enough, as far as I'm concerned. And if we did, we'd be reassessing everything on a regular basis. And we'd be asking ourselves the hard questions about how things are traveling for us right now.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I think that's true.
yeah. So if we go to Nice Girl series, and I'm sincerely hoping that everyone listening to this has read at least one, if not all of them, and if you haven't, do so. Um, they're incredibly practical. And that's what struck me. The language is accessible, the narrative is accessible, it's relatable, and you can actually do something with it. I'm a big one for action, that you can become as aware as you like and do as much auditing as you like, but unless you do something, the change, the shift will never happen. So it gives you all of that. What I've noticed in there is common threads, and I've got three common threads for me, and they're all C's. I hadn't even thought of that. Communication, courage, and confidence. Right?
Yes.
I see those three platforms and those three pursuits
Mhm,
as key parts to the Nice Girl series, and they're definitely huge parts of Boost Your Career. So, in your mind, what are the simple shifts that women can make when it comes to those three platforms, communication, courage, and confidence, that will enhance their impact? Because I think that's what Nice Girls, and it's certainly what Boost is all about. How do women enhance their impact? Because I'm not talking about change, because you've already got a lot of skills that you're bringing to the table. How do we
mhm,
enhance those so that you're doing even better in the workplace? And
mhm.
how do we do that through those three platforms? It's a convoluted question, isn't it?
Boy, it's
But really,
loaded.
it's a discussion about those three.
Yeah, it's loaded. But
Yeah,
as you said it, what went through my mind was that when you gain communication skills, right? When you feel as if you're a good communicator, you gain more confidence. And the more confidence you have, the more courage you have to say what has to be said and do what has to be done. So those three are almost, they kind of interlinked,
yeah.
right?
Mm,
So let's just start with communication. Um, in terms of communication, I think women first have to give themselves permission to
yeah,
be seen and heard, right? I can give you all the tools in the world. They are not going to work. If
yeah,
deep down in your heart, you're suffering from this thing about, children are to be seen and not heard, girls are to be seen and not heard. If you got any of those messages in childhood, that
yeah,
you were less than a boy, less than your brother, you should be quieter, you shouldn't make as much noise, you should, I don't care where you got them, you could get them at home, you could get them in church, you could get them in school, you can currently get them in the workplace. No matter where you get them, you need to talk back to the voice in your head that says that has any veracity, because it has zero. And so the the first thing I ask women to do is create a mantra, right? And that mantra, I don't care what that mantra is. It can be, I deserve to be seen and heard. I will be seen and heard. I will not be ignored. Mine, when I was first learning to do this, was I'm not invisible, right? And sometimes I would say that out loud. If what I had to say wasn't acknowledged, I would say right out loud, "Am I invisible? Did anybody hear what I said?" To just call back attention to it. But I think women have to start kind of in their heads about what they're entitled to. And they are entitled to be seen and to be heard. And until you get that, all the tips in the world aren't going to help you. So that's why I want you to come up with I would want your listeners to come up with their own mantra for what it means to be seen, to be heard for them. Okay. So that's number one. The second thing is to take small baby steps, right? Where do you feel as if you aren't heard? What is the situation? In what environment do you feel as if your voice is drowned out? And the other thing to do is go back to your original family, because you've read all my books, and you know that my philosophy is what we need to overcome is what we learned as children. And what we learned often forms our greatest strengths, right? And so we're afraid to not rely on those strengths because something will go wrong. But at some point, your greatest strengths become your greatest liability. So let me just give an example. In my case, right, I had a mother who was kind of histrionic, right? And so I always say she was like an Alka-Seltzer. You put an Alka-Seltzer in water, it fizzes up and then it fizzes down. And so you have to imagine being the child in the presence of that. You learn to be a good observer. You learn to be a nice girl. You learn to be a good girl because you certainly don't want to be the recipient of any of the negative stuff that goes along with that. And so I really and I think to some degree am, the quintessential nice girl, right? And so what you need to be able to do is say, okay, where does that serve me well? There's certain parts of being nice I'm going to keep. I'm never going to give them up, right? I believe in respecting other people. I believe in listening to other people, not embarrassing people, having a high regard for other human beings. I believe in all that. But at some point in my life, I had to start complimenting that with saying what I really thought, with really taking no risks, right?
Yeah.
About jumping off the cliff a little bit more. If I didn't do that, I'd be stuck at being a nice girl. So, once you get into your head, you have the right. The next thing is to say, so whose voice is in your head saying that you don't have that right? And you need to be able to talk back to that voice. And you need to say, I'm an adult now. And so I can do things my way and start taking baby steps. And so in that situation where maybe you're not heard, could be you come from a big family, could be your mother, could be your boss is just overwhelming, right? Being able to say, what 2 or 3 things can I do that would make the most difference? Because as you know, in my books, there are hundreds of tips. I just want people to do 2 or 3 things. So for example, if you feel as if your voice isn't heard and you need to start having it heard, maybe you need to start by using what I call the contrasting technique, right? Contrasting is what you do and what you don't want in communication. So it sounds like this: Louise, I don't want you to think I'm not grateful for everything that you're doing for me as we're working together, because I certainly am. At the same time, I do need to talk about some things I need more of. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, it's as simple as that. So learn a few techniques, practice the contrasting technique. You could do it in a restaurant. You get the wrong meal and you call the wait person over and you say, I really appreciate how you're serving our table well. Something went wrong between what I asked for and what I got. And so this wasn't what I had requested. And I'd really appreciate it if you'd take it back and bring me whatever it was that I wanted. Okay, that's how you show high regard for people and still at the same time have your voice heard. There's a technique that I teach also that I think is good early in people's journey to learn, and that's called the desk script, DESC. The desk script is how you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Okay.
It's about how to have those difficult conversations, right? Contrasting is one thing to do, but sometimes the conversation needs to be even deeper than that. And maybe it's somebody who's done harm to you, or somebody that you need to have a real heart to heart with. And in the desk script, it's exactly what it sounds like, DESC. You describe why you want to have a conversation. You explain what the situation is in your mind. You specify what you want, and you create consequences for that. So again, if I were to just demonstrate it for a second, it would be, Louise, I'd like to talk to you about something that happens in meetings. You may not have noticed this, but when I go to speak, you often start playing with your cell phone and answering messages or sending out messages. I'm not even sure what you're doing, but I can only tell you it makes me feel as if what I have to say isn't important. Have you noticed that at all, Louise? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to revert to listening. So, no matter what you say to me, you could tell me, no, I don't do that. Or you could say, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I did it. Either way, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to listen to what you say. All right. That's all I'm going to do. And I'm going to say, okay, be that as it may, let me tell you what would be really helpful to me is if when I go to speak, you don't just listen, but you really amplify what I'm saying because you are well respected in the department. And I think if you were to comment on what I say or ask a question or just repeat it for that matter, I think that it would get a lot more traction for me. And then the other thing would be, if you wouldn't mind, really shoot holes in my ideas from time to time because you have good ideas. And I think if we could take it to the next level, the idea would become even better and more palatable to everybody. So that's what I'd like to ask you for. Do you think you could do that for me? And then what would you say?
Absolutely. I'd say absolutely, because it's so inclusive. You've included me in this journey and you've asked for my opinion, you've sought my feedback, and you've done it in a way that is entirely present and in tune with where you're headed and what's happening in your head and heart.
Exactly. And I'm not leaving you guessing what I want. I'm not saying, you always interrupt me in meetings or you never listen to me in meetings, which just sounds like whining. Instead, it's presenting how I feel about something that nobody can take that away from me. You can disagree with me, but you can't take away that I feel not heard. And then presenting solutions, and then the consequences should always follow. And in this case, I would use positive consequences. I'd say something like, if you do that for me and I do that for you, I really think we'd be a winning team here and we could get a lot accomplished in this department. Mm-hmm. Just leave it at that. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, when you have this kind of conversation with people, their behavior changes. Yeah. They may not say, oh, yeah, you're right, I'm going to do it. But their behavior changes. And that's what you want. 1 time out of 10, you're dealing with a narcissist and nothing's going to change them. Right?
We've all had that.
Yes. And nothing's going to change them anyway. And you're not crazy. So when it comes to communication, that's where I would start. I'd start by developing my mantra, by talking back to the voice in my head, and just taking 2 or 3 simple techniques and start applying them in really low risk situations. Did that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. And there are so many different techniques that people can try. I find one of the conversations that I have run exactly the same way, and they're I know what I'm about to say. It's all in my head and I just can't get it out. And my response is always, have you practiced? Have you said it out loud in front of a mirror? Have you looked yourself in the eye, said it out loud? Because our brains are so suggestible. Once the brain's heard you say it, it'll help you repeat it. So take advantage of all of these little tips and tricks because together they'll allow you to speak up when the time's right. Is that something that you
Exactly. Exactly. And if you think about all those, when you talk about, you say it out loud and kind of the neurons connect and then they remember it
they do?
the same way they remember all those old negative messages. Who are you to think? Right? Nobody's going to listen to you anyway. You're not the
What would
smartest
you
kid on
know?
the block. Right. You remember all those. Well,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
absolutely right, Louise, that once you start creating these positive messages, they kind of take over. And it's not as if you ever look like, I always say I'm a recovering nice girl, right? It's like some of the old messages pop up, but luckily, more of the more positive, empowered messages pop up more often than anything else. And that kind of leads us into you asked about confidence. Well, Eleanor Roosevelt said we gain courage and confidence by doing the things we think we cannot do, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
she
that's
said so
why
many wonderful things. I
she
quote
did,
her a
didn't
lot.
she?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Whenever
Absolutely.
anybody asks me if you could sit down with anybody in history, who would it be? I always say it's Eleanor.
Yeah,
I wish I
she's
could
one of
just,
mine.
I just wish I could, kind of understand her a little bit better. But so anyway, with Eleanor, doing things you think you cannot do, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And what I tell
Yeah.
women is, it's worse to not try and never make a mistake
Mm.
than to try and make a mistake. Try and then find that you failed at something. I have failed at so many things. I have fallen flat. Trust me. I have. And it doesn't, I want you to think about walking as a child. How many times when you started walking as a child did you fall down? Did you ever say, this walking thing isn't for me? Right?
Do that.
Yeah.
Give
This
up.
walking Yeah, this walking
Yeah.
thing isn't for me. I've fallen down
Yeah.
too many times. Yeah, the more you do it, the more confidence that you get. And the other thing I say is, and when you fail, don't apologize. People want to know you learned from it. That's all they really want to know, and that it's not going to happen again. And so to be able to go back and say, hey, this didn't turn out how I wanted it to. Here's what I intend to do differently next time. Do you have any feedback for me?
Yeah.
That sounds confident.
Yeah. That's a woman, not a girl. Saying you're sorry. Women say they're sorry all the time for everything. And is it
Mhm.
really that you're sorry, or is it that this is not quite what you anticipated? And
Yes, exactly. And we
yeah,
need to, unless you shot someone's mother in the foot, I don't think I'm sorry belongs in your vocabulary at all.
I
Really,
agree.
it doesn't. And so I like what you say, yes, yeah, that didn't turn out as I wanted. I always think about these guys I played golf with once. This was many years ago. I was in a twosome with two guys, and I didn't know who they were. And one of them, hits off the tee, he drives, and it goes right into the woods. And me being who I am, said, "Oh, that's too bad." He said, "That wasn't a bad shot. It just didn't go where I wanted it to."
You go,
It was a
boom.
bad shot. It was a bad shot. It was a
That
bad
is
shot.
such the difference between men and women, is right there.
Yeah. And I want women to kind of remember that, hey, you didn't do anything wrong. It just didn't go where you wanted it to.
Didn't turn out how I anticipated.
Exactly. So I think in terms of, once you have the skills under your belt and the communication, then you start applying them in all kinds of situations. And the more you do it, repetition brings confidence.
Yeah.
Repetition. Just one other quick story. I'll never forget. When I was in graduate school, I had to give a presentation to my graduate school class. And I worked really hard on this. And I gave what I knew was a good presentation. And my professor said, you have the confidence that comes with repetition. And I thought, is that a left-handed compliment? Is that a compliment? Or does that mean like, it wasn't very good? I didn't know how to take it, but I never forgot. You have the confidence that comes with repetition. And so the practice, right? The more you do something, the better you are at it and the more confident you are. So that's that. And then you said the courage, right? And once you have some wins under your belt, because
Yeah.
you've taken some risks,
Mm.
once you have some wins under your belt, you probably have collected enough chips to take bigger risks. And that's where the courage comes in,
Yeah.
right? You've established yourself, you've established your expertise, you know who you are, you're not afraid of losing at the game because hey, it's all a game and you're winning it, right? You're winning it. So take some bigger risks. Have the courage to speak the unspoken, to do things you never thought you could do, because our past is the best prediction of the future.
Yeah.
All right. So if I've had successes, I'm going to have future successes.
Mm.
And so I hope I put those three things together for you. It was a good question. I kind of had to unpack it and put it back together again.
Yeah. It's just that they're the three things that always come out for me when I think about women in the workplace and women being empowered to be themselves and be their best version of self in the workplace. They seem to all pack together to create that one package of being present, of being heard. Is that,
Mm-hmm.
I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking, we're really talking about workplace visibility, aren't we? And women managing themselves to be visible in the workplace. For me, that's where nice girls don't speak up or stand out really slots in. That when we do speak up, when we do stand out, and we do that with confidence and courage and excellent communication, that we're increasing our visibility in the workplace. What are your big ticks and tips for women and workplace visibility? How does that sit for you?
I'm going to use one word:
Okay.
branding.
Yeah,
Branding,
well, yeah,
right?
absolutely. Brand me. Yeah.
That if you want to be visible,
Yeah.
then you had better build a brand that people want to see and use and buy. And if you don't think branding in the workplace is important, you are missing an opportunity. That all branding is identifying what you want people to say about you when you leave a room and making sure you behave in ways that enable them to say that. Because people don't know us by our intentions, people know us by our behaviors. And so, I can say, you need to speak with confidence, right? Or I think I speak with confidence. But if I sat here and I talked to you like this through this whole interview, right? It's not what I say, it's what I do. And so once you know what you want people to say about you, then they have to see that. So not most women, but a lot of women will say, I want people to say she's smart, she knows what she's doing, and she's a real team player. Okay, if you want them to say those three things, what do they have to see you doing? They have to see it. It's like there's a video camera on you. If the video camera can't see it, people can't say it. So to say that I'm smart, what do you have to do? You have to come to every single meeting prepared. You have to participate in meetings. You have to speak up early and often. You have to be willing to say things other people aren't willing to say. You need to know the data. You need to stay on top of everything in your field. That's how people are going to say you're smart. It doesn't matter if it's in here, right? So I really encourage women to build their brand. And I hope in your workshops that you may be doing some of that.
This is not easy. I say that a lot. to create that brand and to stay on brand takes work. It takes thought and preparation, and it takes consistency. And that's all hard work, right? That just doesn't happen overnight. It might happen naturally for a lot of men because their innate male strengths allow that. It's not an innate female strength, and it's one that we need to work on. I talk about it in terms of intent and impact, that
Mhm.
regardless of your intent, what's the impact you're having? Because then
Right.
you can go back. I'm doing something that's a disconnect, and it will always be behaviours. It will
Mhm.
always be what you say or what you do
Right. It
that
is.
create that
And,
creates
you
the
know,
imbalance.
in graduate schools, in business schools, they call that impression management,
Okay, I
right?
like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
How are you going to manage people's impressions of you? It's going to be what you do. I mean, and when we
Yes.
think about, us as brands, and I'm sure you've seen the data, about 50% of people's impressions of us come from how we look,
Yeah, exactly.
right? 40% comes from what we say. I'm sorry, how you look, how you sound. I'm sorry. 50% is how you look. 40% is how you sound. Not what you say. Only 10% is what you say.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
it's a little bit like Donald Trump. What's that?
No, no, going there.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's
But
a
it is
bit
a
like
little like
Donald
Donald
Trump. All
Trump.
right.
He may look and sound in some ways like a president, but if you listen to what he says, it makes no sense. And yet he
Yeah.
keeps moving forward.
Mm,
That is the power of the look and sound. And so
yeah.
imagine if you had what it took, if you really have something of value to add to a meeting, to an organization, but you have to have the look and sound. There's a Chinese curse. May you have a wonderful idea and not be able to convince anyone of it.
Huh.
Right.
Oh,
And so,
that's terrible.
yeah,
That is
right.
a curse.
That is a curse. And so, so you need to make sure that you are managing that brand. And you are absolutely right, Louise. It takes some attention. But once you do it, it comes naturally. Like, I remember the first time I was on the Today Show, I was so excited. And by the way, that's the other thing about intentionality. We haven't talked about that, but you're going to get exactly what your intentions focus on, right? In our lives, this is exactly what it has happened in my life over and over and over. So when I used to go to New York City, I would stand outside the Today Show window. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Today Show in New York, but it has this window that people can look in while it's being
Yeah.
filmed. And I would look in and I would picture myself sitting on the couch being interviewed by one of those people, right? And so when I got called to be on, this was many years later. It was like, oh yeah, I visualized that. But before I went on, I talked to a guy who focuses on communication skills, and I said, "Give me some tips for how I can hit a home run." And he said, "What three things do you want people to say about you when they turn off the TV?" And those
Yeah.
three things became my brand, right? I want them to say she knows what she's talking about. I want them to say that she is down to earth and approachable. And I want them to say that she has a good sense of humor. And that really became my brand. Make sure you know what you're talking about. Make sure that you are approachable and keep a sense of humor about it all. And so,
Absolutely.
but people can ask themselves the same question. If you were going to go on TV, when people turn off the TV, what do you want them to say? That's your brand.
Mm. Yeah, it's a really important, and I talk about conscious choice, which is intentionality. It's making that absolute choice around who you will be and how you will present. I have my own little mantras and my own way of preparing for workshops, and it's identical to that. It's where's the content of this? What do I want people to take away, and how do I want them to feel? Is that
Mhm.
emotional response that I want people to have, and that needs to come from me. So how do I draw them in? How do I create that impression? But it's all conscious. None of this is just, oh, that'll just happen. Like
No.
it's a conscious choice that we make to create that impression, to have that impact, to be that particular person in that particular moment. And I'm sure you made that before you sat down today, even to talk on this little
Mhm.
podcast. Like
Mhm.
that's what we
Absolutely.
do. Yeah,
Yes.
that's
You
the
know,
preparation. That's why I say it's not easy. Women, this doesn't just happen, right?
mhm,
It's a choice you make around how you will engage with the world around you,
mhm.
and
Exactly.
what will they take from you in that moment.
Mhm.
It can be really exciting, don't you think?
I think it's very exciting to create our own lives, to create our own paths,
Yeah.
it's very exciting. And I think too many women take what's given to them, that they
Yeah,
think, this
without
is my lot.
questioning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is my lot. I was supposed to grow up and get married and get a job and have kids.
Yep.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I also think that sometimes this is what leads to depression in women.
Yeah.
Anna Freud said it's the good, capable, conscientious woman who's more likely to be depressed than her counterparts.
Yeah.
So, and that's because
Unfulfilled.
unfulfilled,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, if you're feeling that way,
Mm.
it really is about saying, and don't, where is the delta between what I have and what I want?
Mm.
And how do I get from here to here using little
Yeah.
baby steps?
Mm. Yeah. And I have to do something, that's the attitude. I actually have to do something. This will not fall in my lap, and I will not shift just because I desire it.
Mhm.
There's an action to be taken. I can't stress that enough for people. Do something, people.
Mhm. Yeah, I have vanity license plates on my car.
Okay.
Choices.
Choices, yeah, well, exactly.
Mhm.
And conscious choices.
Yeah. Mhm.
You mentioned it a minute ago, and I've heard you joke about recovering nice girl movement. And I'd like to think that I am absolutely a lifelong member of the recovering nice girl movement. My very rural Catholic upbringing would attest to that. When you think about lifelong learning lessons and supporting women to be a recovering nice girl, what are the tips you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I'd like women to think about complementarity. Okay,
Oh, okay.
that there needs to be complementarity in our lives. That it's all good to be kind and generous. I mean, all those stereotypical feminine traits, right? Nurturing,
Yeah.
um, generous,
Yes.
uh, all those things,
Supportive.
supportive. I think all those things are important in everyday life. They're important in the workplace. They're important in leaders, right?
Yeah.
If you aspire to be a leader, they're important in leaders.
Mm.
But there has to be complementarity. That if I am only this, all these stereotypically things over here, I will not achieve my goals and my dreams. And to
Yeah.
achieve my goals and my dreams, I need to add complementary behaviors, not stop any of this, not stop it. Add, add learning how to be direct, add
Yeah.
feeling as if I'm entitled, add tools and techniques that are going to help me express myself in the best way possible. I have to add researching what would
Mm.
make me happy. Where are my proclivities? Where are my strengths? So once you start adding those things, then you have a full person. You have a
Mm.
wholly, fully baked person, right? If you
Mm.
only rely on those stereotypical behaviors, people will love you. They'll want to be around you. I, I'm telling you, it feels good, but I don't know that you're ever going to achieve your goals unless you have complementarity. And so that's what I've tried to do in my books is provide the complementary behaviors that women often can't see or they don't know how to do it. And as you and I both know, as consultants, as coaches, we always say, if I knew better, I'd do better, right? If people knew better, they'd do better. So it's our job to help them see what is the array of choices you have. You just may not be able to see them. It's also a very existential philosophy that, our role is really to make choices in our lives. And the helper's role is to illuminate the choices.
It's that simple. The reason it's not is it relies on us really honing in on reflective practice to be clear around what conscious choice is and how that affects our impact, and to make those choices to be the best version of ourselves. I talk about balance, you talk about being complementary. It's the same approach. It's recognizing that there's a full suite of skills available to you that will create the you that has the most impact. Fascinating how we don't do that earlier on in our careers. I suppose that's what my journey is, and that's what your journey is. It's reaching people so that we help them earlier in their careers. I often think back to mine and think, gee, I wish I'd had these conversations way earlier in my career. But it was a different world then, Lois. So,
It was a different world. It was a totally different world. All these things we're talking about, I think would have been hard 35 years ago, 40 years ago. Not impossible, but they would have been hard. And when you talk about having all these choices, when I had another book that I wrote that it actually was well received, but it didn't get a lot of popularity. And it was Stop Sabotaging Your Career.
Your career, yeah.
And it was for both men and women. And in that book, I say, it's the person who has the most tools in their toolkit that wins the game. Because you have to know
I agree more.
Right? Which tool do I pull out in this situation?
Yep. Yeah.
If you only have a hammer, everything's a nail.
Yeah.
You need to have all of these tools that you can pull out with a difficult conversation, with being direct, with looking and sounding professional, with knowing what my brand is, right? And it can be overwhelming. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step.
One step. Yeah. Always. That's a great book. There are so many other books that you've written. I see Jane Lead. That came out the same year as Stop Sabotaging Your Career. Talk about prolific. How many books have you published so far? Are you up to 40-something?
No. There might be 7 or 8. There might be 7 or 8. And
come on.
Not all of them are equally as popular. But I'm actually doing a 20-year update. And this kind of ties into something that we were talking about before we started the recording about writing. They contacted me a couple months ago and said, would you do an update for Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office? Because it's dated now. I said, I don't know that anybody wants
to. By the way, there's not a lot of dating.
No, thank you. Thank you. I said, I don't know that anybody needs to hear about this anymore. I don't know that I want to put any more energy into this. And then somebody wrote me a letter, just an email, and said, I'm 25 years old and I just read your book and it really helped me in this situation. And I thought, wow, she was 5 years old when I wrote Corner Office. And now she's saying this book really helped her. So I went back to the publisher and I said, all right, I'll do it. I'll do an update. So I am going to do an update. I assume it'll be out some point next year. We don't have all the details ironed out yet. I just sent her the outline. It'll talk more about like women in their first jobs, which I don't really touch on in Corner Office, remote working, work-life balance, which 20 years ago nobody wanted to talk about.
No.
So I'll be talking about some new things. Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm delighted because I'm delighted that you're doing that. What I'm not delighted about is the fact that it remains relevant in 2024, a book that was written in, what year was that? 2005 or something.
Yeah, it was
Is
2004. Well, I wrote it in 2003, and I think it came out in
yeah,
2004. So
and it's still
it's old.
relevant. Still
Yeah.
relevant, still the conversations. I mean, Boost Your Career, that's what I do in Boost Your Career, the same conversations. And I think one of the big, big ticket items here is make some choices, women. Make
Mhm.
some choices, fill that toolbox and use it. They're great little
Yeah.
tips for
Yeah,
people.
and that's what I would encourage people listening to this. I'd say
Yeah,
if you invested this much time in listening to us,
yeah,
what one thing are you going to do differently?
yeah,
One thing, just one thing.
yeah.
And that one thing will lead to something else. And that will lead to something else.
Guaranteed.
Mhm.
Absolutely guaranteed. Dr. Lois Frankel, your name is synonymous with empowering women in the workplace, and everything we've talked about today scratches the surface on this amazing topic. Women are incredibly powerful and strong, and they can be such a positive influence in the shaping of future organisations right across the world. Are there any final tips that you'd like to add before I sadly say goodbye?
Well, what popped in my head, so I guess it's meaningful, is be the change you wish to see,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we've seen that written and on postcards and on things like that. I had a sign in my office for years that said, be the change you wish to see.
Mm.
And it was a constant reminder that if change is going to happen, it's going to happen with me. And
Yeah.
so I just really encourage women to take those baby steps and be that change. And we
Mm.
have a responsibility to the next generation. It's not a nice to, it's a must do.
Yeah, completely agree. I've been a little bit starstruck today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I know that we were connected through a mutual friend of ours, Bev Ryan from Smart Girl Publishing. A huge shout out to her. But I'd also like to say that the reason that happened was because both Bev and myself attended a networking event, and neither of us had been to one for ages. You turn up at a networking event, you don't know what's going to come from it.
Exactly. Exactly. Every
Thank
interaction, you don't know what's going to come from it. That's why you
you.
do it.
One engagement at a time. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Hello, Louise Phelan here, and you've been listening to yet another Boost Talk, and I know you loved it. These women are being so generous with their time and their experience and their expertise, and it's great to have their perspective on their career enhancement strategies for women in this post-pandemic hybrid workplace that we find ourselves in. So for more information, head on over to our website, boostyourcareer.com.au, and I'll see you there.